Today feels like a day where we need to be a distraction for people. I don't know like what it is, but I think it's also because I'm in California that I cannot get away from stuff with the ice raids.
Yeah.
And it's been heavy. It's been heavy as fuck. So I want to acknowledge that that's happening, first of all, because it's happening literally like near me, you know. And it sucks. It's really hard to watch. Yeah, I don't even know what else to say because it's just been like really rough.
Yeah. It's really hard. And it should be like
Yeah.
I guess that's just like the thing is like this is supposed to be brutal and I have a really hard time that that's normal. Like
Hmm.
you shouldn't be watching this stuff and just be like, anyway, I'm just gonna continue on with my day. um, like I feel like sometimes people are too hard on themselves about being affected by this stuff, but that's like literally the point of
Hmm.
doing it in the first place.
Like I'm sharing resources at least for my local area on Instagram. If anyone is in the San Jose or Bay Area, there's a bunch of lawyers and stuff putting out free courses about immigration for other lawyers, for anyone that needs to potentially represent themselves. So just know that there's resources out there and keep an eye out there for them. I wanted to revisit Star Wars for a second, both because of some of the response to the clips we've posted and just like things that I'm finding now that I've seen the sequel trilogy and I'm like able to engage in fandom stuff a little bit more with that. Um, the blatant misogyny is wasn't I wasn't expecting. So, firstly, I'm going to address a comment that we got about saying like too much on one of the Star Wars videos because there is a very obvious bias towards female like speech patterns. The Valley Girl thing was like really heavily criticized when we were growing up. It was kind of the vocal fry of our childhood, you know? And then vocal fry got heavily criticized because of the Kardashian women, especially, and because that was like a hallmark of the early 2000s. And so some of us who say like as our kind of like mental processing word, it comes from that culture still. It really does. And so it's interesting because like the person didn't really add anything to the discussion like in this comment where they counted how many times you said like, or was it me? I don't know which one of us they were critiquing,
It was
but
me.
just I needed to call that out for what it is because it felt misogynistic to me when I saw it in our YouTube little like comment section, and I was just like, oh Lord, oh Lord, what have we gotten into? I kind of knew there was going to be some Star Wars bros when we decided to talk about Star Wars, but
Hmm.
yeah.
They're always how.
Yeah, the one thing we could say about the Star Wars fandom as a whole is that none of them agree on anything and it's chaos. It's complete
Yeah.
chaos.
It's
Yeah.
it's it's way too big for anyone to fully agree on anything. There are some things that people generally agree on, but still, it's such a big thing that means so many different things to different people that that's like that's the fun of it.
No. So one thing I wasn't expecting to after watching this, like, was having to defend Liking Gray as a character. Like, I was not
Oh yeah.
expecting that to be an unpopular thing. Because right away people are like, "What do you like about her?" Like, and it's like she's everything I wanted Leia to be if we got a sequel earlier. Um, so the way that Leia interacts with the Force, in my opinion, I know like the big moment where we're supposed to be like, this is the first time she's able to access it, is right after Luke falls down that hole and he's hanging on to the bottom of a building and he's calling to her and she's like, I know where
Hmm.
he is, right? That's supposed to be her first time interacting with the Force. But also, she got tortured by Darth Vader, by her dad, and didn't give any information for the longest time. Like that that to me so shows like something. There's something there, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if they put little hints of that intuition side of the Force into her characterization of the Obi-Wan show, that recently came out that I know has like a baby Leia storyline.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing that's fun about the Force is that the idea is that if you're like Force sensitive or whatever you want to call it, that there's just certain things that maybe are harder to do that you can somehow pull off. And it's kind of the idea of just spiritual help. Like we imagine it in our world, like that's the way that I kind of imagine that stuff. Is like you're going through a really hard thing. How am I going to survive this? The idea that like there's something that you can connect to that helps you in a way that you normally wouldn't be able to get through it. And so not only does Leia survive really bad torture, she also sees her entire planet blow up.
Hmm.
Um, and then also another character like that is Finn. Like people speculated about how Finn was force sensitive and Finn was a Jedi, not only because they used that in the marketing of The Force Awakens and faked out that he was the Jedi, which is something that I don't like that they did that because it made people excited that he was going to be and then disappointed when they realized that he wasn't.
Hmm.
But overall, the idea of Finn being another Jedi was something in The Force Awakens because he was able to somehow hang on to his humanity while he grew up in a totalitarian cult that abducted him when he was like 2 or 3 years old. Like, in The Force Awakens, there's a picture of him when they show like the bridge with Kylo and Hux and stuff when he's getting away and they just have a picture of him up on the screen and it's like a two or it's like a 2 year old child. And so that's how people figured out like how little he was when he got taken by them. But it's just the whole idea that not only does he somehow survive the first order enough to still be himself, but just the idea that he somehow found Poe at the exact right time
Hmm.
to not only get away from the first order but also save Poe's life. And then by my favorite thing about the sequel trilogy is that everything good that happens is because of Finn. That if Finn wouldn't have left the First Order, then Poe wouldn't have survived, and Rey would have been killed by the First Order when they went to get BB-8, and they would have found Luke, and they would have just killed him before anyone ever knew what was even going on. You only hear about the Force with the Jedi. Doesn't mean they're the only one who use it. The exact same way that the only time you hear about like religious stuff or like God maybe is through like a pastor at church, but that doesn't mean that's the only way to be spiritual.
Hmm.
It's the same stuff. But yeah, I knew that people would say that about Ray because I listened to them say that about her for many years.
Yeah.
And I told you, quite literally boils down to I don't like a Jedi having boobs. That's That's literally all it is. They don't like that she's a girl and they try to like work backwards and come up with all these different reasons as to why. Like no matter where bigoted people are, that's what they do. Like that's what they did with Percy Jackson season 1, 2 with Leah and whoever else they picked at the time. That's just what they do with every like kind of casting decision like that. If it's somebody different than a white male, there are always going to be people like that will try to find something wrong with it. And it's like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with the best thing about how J.J. Abrams wrote Rey is that she is similar enough, but also her own character from Luke. Like she's similar enough to Luke, but also very different from him at the same time. That almost nothing that they complain about isn't something that Luke has already done. And so it makes you sound like a giant hypocrite if you have a problem with her doing it, but you don't have any problem with him doing any of that stuff. Like, you sound like a giant hypocrite if you think that Rey got too good at her powers too soon in The Force Awakens because she beat Kylo at the end of the fight when they show how she has a history of learning, of knowing how to be physically strong and how to fight because she's had to do that her whole life.
Hmm.
But you're okay with Luke at the end of A New Hope just blowing up the Death Star
Yeah.
when he's never even driven an X-wing before. That was
Yeah.
the first time he's ever ridden in an X-wing. Period is when he's driving it and he blows up the Death Star and saves everyone during his first time ever doing anything like that.
with no
And
navigation. Like he turns
yeah,
off all of the stuff in
just
the
purely
X-rays.
using like connecting to the force. But it's like if you don't have any problem with tiny little Luke, who was tried to be kept from that by his aunt and uncle his whole life, but you have a problem with a character like Rey, who has had to fight for literally everything she's ever gotten in life, and she has every actual reason for why she has those skills, but you have a problem with her, then you just have a problem with a girl,
Yeah.
because they give like built-in reasons. Like I told you this, but one of the favorite things that Star Wars fans noticed is that when Rey fights with a lightsaber in The Force Awakens, she's fighting with it like it's the stick that she has on her back. Like she stabs with it, like when she's winning against Kylo, she's literally using it to like stab him like in the side and stuff like that. She's not using it like an actual lightsaber. She's
Mhm.
just using it like the only thing she knows how to fight with, because that's the only way she knows how to fight. She doesn't know what a lightsaber is. She's just using it. She's using it in replace of the thing that she usually uses, but she's using it in the exact same way. And it's just those little details of why she wins in that fight is also because Kylo's having like a little bit of a mental collapse. and
Yes.
he's also injured. Like he has an injury from when they shot at him when he stabbed his father to death.
Mhm.
And then he's also kind of losing it a little bit because he just killed his dad. And so those two things together is why, and also the Force was mad at him. They were like, "Fuck you." Like
Yeah.
you killed your dad and didn't listen to us.
Yeah, like he calls for the lightsaber and immediately zooms past him. So,
Yeah, they're
um,
like, "Well, I don't want you."
yeah. Well, and so this brings me to I stumbled upon a Reddit thread where people were having the "Is Rey a Mary Sue" argument. Is she like that skilled that it's too easy? And of course, the comments on it were so long. There were some of them where it's like, I'm not even gonna fucking read this bullshit. Like,
No,
I'm not.
no.
Because they were saying stupid things like in The Last Jedi, when everybody is trapped and looking for a way out, and there's a way out, but it's blockaded by a bunch of rocks. Rey should have been struggling one by one to take them. They would have gotten captured before she did that. Like, let's just talk about the practicality of that scene.
Yeah, like, are you kidding me? Like, The Last Jedi is The Last Jedi. And so that scene of Luke faking out Kylo by not even being there, so giving them time so they can leave, and his
Hmm.
line telling Kylo like the resistance is not ending today. I am not and I am not the last Jedi is the best part of that entire movie. I still love watching that part of that movie when Luke walks out and stops an entire army just by standing there and he's not even there.
Hmm.
Like if they're so afraid of him because of his reputation that they don't even realize that he's not even there, and he still stops an entire army just by his ghost. And that whole part is the best part of that entire movie. And so are you really taking away the best part of that stupid movie to complain about like she should have had to try harder with the rocks? I'm like, she's about to see Finn again. She's about to like see everyone in the resistance again and save their life instead of them being slaughtered by the guy who just emotionally manipulated her for this entire movie. Like are you like this, it's stupid that we have to say things like this, but it's like you know that like when people love people, like maybe people on Reddit don't experience love and that's why they're on Reddit, but generally people who experience love, you do things that you normally maybe wouldn't do in an easier way because it's somebody that you care about.
Hmm.
Like she loves those people, so of course she's gonna move. All the rocks are gonna go flying out of the way because she wants to save her friends.
Hmm.
Like, is it that hard to understand? It's
Yeah.
not.
Well, and
It's just because
like
she's a girl.
so the other thing that gets me about Rey's characterization is I see her as somebody extremely hopeful from the very beginning. Like she's
Hmm.
literally counting off the days that she's been left alone because she thinks somebody's going to come back from her for her, even despite it being years. And so when when she finds out, like, not only does the Force exist, but I can access it, she doesn't have that same disbelief that Luke starts out with. Where,
Hmm.
like, we see him training with Yoda and he's struggling. And he's struggling because he doesn't necessarily believe in the Force. It's been gone for so long, nobody he knows could use it. So, like, of course he's going to be like, I don't think this is real.
Hmm.
At least just a little bit. But Ray grew up hearing about Luke Skywalker, and like I'm sorry, but if it was me and I grew up hearing there's this special cosmic force that people can access, here's a hero guy that did it, and then I find out I have power to do it, yeah, I'm putting all my fucking belief in that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's like the thing about Ray and Finn, especially that they're both very hopeful people.
Mhm.
They still have a lot of empathy for a lot of people. They still care about people in general and just believe that things can be better. And it's just those are always the people that should be the star of something like Star Wars.
Yeah.
The thing that there's so many arguments like this in years gone past, and I will say that the favorite thing that women or female, I guess, presenting, I will say, Star Wars fans would bring up is that Anakin is a Mary Sue.
Yeah,
And
Anakin's more of a Mary Sue than she
he
is.
absolutely 100%, 10 billion percent is one. If there is one in Star Wars, it is Anakin, the guy that from the age of like 9 was somehow this super special being that was super duper connected to the super special force that nobody else could understand and was about to become a Jedi master when he was like 21 or something, whatever, 23, I think his age is in Return of the Sith. And then, slaughters everybody and kills them. But his whole story about like him being literally born out of the Force, apparently, and that's the only thing that George Lucas could come up
Yeah,
with
my brother
to
talked about
explain.
how there's a canon. I don't know if it's actually canon because my brother also likes the EU books, but he said something about there was some Sith Jedi who was trying to create people out of nothing that like
Darth Plagueis.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's a good book. I like that book. But yeah, Darth Plagueis is the book about him is talking about he's the person that kind of helped train Palpatine and stuff. And they basically wrote that book to try to like give some sort of explanation for George Lucas saying that Anakin was born out of the Force and giving zero context. He doesn't even really explain that. I still am forever confused how people ever put that together.
Yeah.
This is not at all what I thought of. And whenever I talk about what I thought happened, there's always people in the comments that are like, "Yeah, I kind of thought something similar too." And I never once thought that it was like a magical birth through the Force or immaculate conception or anything for the longest time. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad I know that I'm not the only person that was like, yeah, I'm not going to like scientific miracles as the first route to go
Well,
for
but
this
his
person.
midi-chlorians.
Yeah, it's just stupid. It's just stupid. It's like that's why I say it's stupid. Like George Lucas is so emotionally like disconnected,
Mhm.
and that's why I think it's so weird that he came up with something like the Force that is supposed to be like a more emotional thing. But
Mhm.
that's why I like to say that Star Wars is way better without him, and the farther away you get from the way that he wrote it, the better it is, because having a story like the idea that he crafted like the prequel trilogy around this idea of the
The
kid
hero's
that
journey and
yeah,
yeah.
that it starts off with him being created through a scientific miracle of midichlorians through the Force that is just so weird sounding, and and that's like the person you're supposed to get connected to instead of somebody like Ray and Finn that are just normal people that have been traumatized their entire life, and so they haven't had anything that they usually would normal people would you would imagine have in your life. And so the thing for them is just getting access to the things they actually need so that they could even realize that they even are connected to something like the Force. Like they just use that stuff to literally survive their
Mhm.
life. They never had time to sit there and be like, do I have different powers? Because it's like they never really got to meet other people besides the people around them. They never had time. Like, when was Ray supposed to have time to figure something like that out. She was
Yeah.
using literally all of her time to work to get enough metals to be exploited by the guy on her planet so that he would give her a small amount of food worth way less than the actual things that she was giving him. She was basically being trafficked, like
Yeah.
labor trafficked by that guy. And so it's like that's she doesn't have time, and like Finn didn't have time in the middle of being trying to be indoctrinated into a death hate cult.
Well, yeah, and Luke's gone, and there's no Jedi around to train her. Like, and
Hmm.
yes, you could like force summon ancient Jedi and stuff, right? But she doesn't know that. She doesn't know that yet. So
And
like,
also that's stupid. Like I went on a whole journey with you in our voice notes of when I looked up what's his name, Colin Trevorrow's Star Wars movie, and how glad I was that never came out.
yeah.
I can only imagine that they would have ended up really doing something interesting with that script when they were actually filming it too. But like the whole stupid Darth Plagueis thing was in that version of that movie that they had Kylo training with some random Darth person that they just made up in that movie that was supposed to be connected to Darth Plagueis, and I was no, like, and I just remembered how during our podcast I was like, yeah, it was stupid. It would be stupid for them to. It would be difficult for them to come up with a villain for the last movie. Nobody would take that villain person seriously, and that's a bad idea, like writing wise. So that's why JJ just went with Palpatine, and I think it's so funny that people rate like him over the coals for it, but it's really Colin Trevorrow that brought it up in the first place because he made up this random villain guy that was training Kylo in the last movie that was connected to Darth Plagueis and Darth Vader and like Palpatine and stuff. And they mentioned Palpatine as being somebody that knew that guy. And so I'm like, yeah, if I was JJ Abrams and I read that as a script that I'm now trying to like turn into something good when I'm taking over this movie after Carrie Fisher dies, I'm just going to cut all the stupid other people out that don't matter. Like you don't need to fight the spirit of Darth Vader, whatever the hell that means. And like this random Darth person that nobody knows or cares about. Why not just fight Palpatine and be done with it? And that's
Mhm.
exactly what he did. Like, but Colin Trevorrow's the one that brought it up in the first place.
Yeah.
You're the one who wrote that stupid script, bro. I just think that's just so funny. But yeah, that's an example of that movie is was literally I felt like I was reading like a Mad Lib game of somebody just bringing in references from things that the Star Wars fandom brings up incessantly, but they were being used in really weird they like if you're going to bring those things into a movie, you should like make it worth it where they actually have some sort of meaning, but they didn't have any meaning at all. They were just kind
Mhm.
of there to be there. And then the entire movie, Ray and Finn were still separate. Like the entire movie, Ray and Finn were going to be separated. For some reason, Finn would get married off to Rose and have force strong children. And I was just like, and like Ray was alone basically all the time, going through everything by herself. And I was like, I am offended that people thought that this movie would be somehow better than the movie that we got.
Yeah, and I could ship Ray and or sorry, Rose and Finn. I could. Definitely Last Jedi if that like if anything with Finn's storyline worked, I did like her with him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, everything that you told me about that script that got thrown out, it's like, thank God, it's trash. We don't need to drag on too much about it other than to say like it's good thing that it did not happen.
Yeah, let's I'll just say that I truly in my deepest soul am really glad that I didn't have to watch Kylo tell Rey that he was the one that killed her parents even though he would have been 10.
Yeah, it made no sense.
Like he would have been 10 years old. Like, are you killing somebody in fourth grade? But like you're the one who killed her parents. And the last words he says is telling her her actual last name because he somehow like remembered her last name. All these, oh my God, get away from me. That would be so stupid.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. It was so hard for me to realize after watching this that people don't like Ray, and you know what?
I will,
I'm
okay,
gonna like her even harder now.
I will say that on Reddit gives you a very skewed outlook. Like when I liked Star Wars or was in that fandom is when I decided I never wanted to be on Reddit ever again
Hmm.
because they were really hateful people. Like they were so bad that you know how I told you that Jason Ward, somebody who was a big name fan in that fandom, became extremely abusive and was like outed for being extremely abusive towards women of all kinds, basically.
Hmm.
When that whole situation was going on, we generally didn't know if Reddit would even care because the crazy thing about that whole story is that the whole time in 2019, after that had been made public, and people knew that he was an extremely abusive husband and was talking making friends with like white supremacists on YouTube and sicking white supremacists onto like individual women in the fandom that like he didn't like because they didn't like him anymore. He was still like posting spoilers for the next movie the entire time. I didn't like look at anything ever again that he ever said, and so I saw zero spoilers for The Rise of Skywalker because I refused to even like look at any of that stuff at all. But the whole year he was like trying to pretend like nothing ever happened. And so like there was a whole thing on Star Wars Reddit where some pages on there like would still post his stuff, some of them wouldn't. Like the biggest one didn't, and right away said like he's banned, and
Hmm.
he like no one is allowed to ever post about him again on here. But Star Wars Reddit is like a giant cesspool, and it makes you think that everyone hates the sequel trilogy, and everyone hates Rey, and everyone hates Finn and Poe and stuff, and even Rose. But that's not true. The majority of people love the new characters. Like when The Force Awakens came out, all of the toys with Rey and Finn sold out first, and they didn't
Hmm.
make enough. They like kept running out, and people kept wanting more because they made more of the like older characters, thinking that people would buy more of those, but they didn't. They wanted Rey. And so like her stuff, like their costumes and things like that always sell out first. People like when you go to Star Wars conventions, people like half of the like women that are there are dressed like Rey or Finn. And so people really like them. It like people loved them. Like the Force Awakens made a disgusting amount of money. Like the amount of money the Force Awakens made is wild. Star Wars fan that I knew of saw the Force Awakens like at least 10 times in the
Hmm.
theater. Like I saw it a, at least 10 times in the
Yeah.
theater. Because it was in the theater for a long time because it was so many people wanted to see it. Like why take it out of the theater when everyone is like it became such a big thing that like my sister went to see it and she doesn't like Star Wars, but it became such this huge thing that she wanted to go see it because so many people were talking about it that she wanted to know what she thought of it. And so like people who don't usually like Star Wars were going to see it because they wanted to see Rey and they
Hmm.
wanted to see Finn and Poe because they loved those characters because they were different from what they thought a Star Wars like lead would be in a good way. And so like Reddit can like cry, generally cry probably to their whoever talks to them still about
Yeah.
Rey being like a Mary Sue, but it's she's the least Mary Sue sort of character in Star Wars because she has there's an easy explanation for everything that she has skills for. And it's
Hmm.
told to you within the plot of the movie without it being like super anvily obvious. Like nobody shows up and says that they are born from midichlorians or something like that. They spend that like 10-minute part of her on her planet when she's just being herself, showing her having all these skills.
Hmm.
And when you think about them later on, you're like, oh yeah, that's why she knows how to do these things. I told you this, but like the thing of those people that always, since back then, always upsets me the most is how they get mad that Rey knew how to like. She basically just figured out from Kylo doing it to her to try to get him out of her mind.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I'm pretty I'm pretty sure that they just like wanted a scene of Rey like being strapped to a table with her mind being raped by Kylo where she wouldn't be able to fight back
Hmm.
and where she would just be like crying or something. Um
Yeah.
that's awful. And so I don't know why they wanted that. but they did because they were mad that she figured out how to fight back. And it's like, yeah, if somebody's attacking you like that, even if you don't really know what you're doing, you're going to try to do anything to fight back. And this movie was written by J.J. Abrams, somebody who actually wanted his female character to not just be like crying on the floor. Like Ray cries a lot, which is one of my favorite things about her, that she shows a lot of emotion, and that her and like Finn are allowed to show that they're upset and they're scared and they don't know what to do, when instead of just pretending like they're strong and tough and all that kind of stuff. But like at the same time, it's not like just like trauma porn. Like they're not
Yeah.
just showing her in pain just for the point of it, like a lot of female characters get. Like no, in that scene, she's not just gonna sit there and just take it. She's been fighting her entire life. She's gonna fight back, and
Hmm.
that's what. So like, it's like one of my favorite parts of the last battle with Kylo is that she goes on that whole crazy thing. She gets to like beat him, and she's like, "Fuck yeah!" And then as soon as he just falls over and he's not moving anymore, she runs over to Finn and just starts crying again.
Hmm.
Because now that she's done with the fight, it's like she was doing that so that he wouldn't kill Finn and so that they could get away. And so it's like she goes back to just being like who was. Like she had to do that because she had to, but she's actually still scared. And now that the fight's over, she can show that she's just really scared
Hmm.
and she doesn't want Finn to die. And I'm like, yeah, she's a person. Um, like really, when it comes down to misogynistic, like what I call Star Wars bros, is they like women that act like men.
Hmm.
Like James Cameron is kind of who does like the Avatar movies, and he did like the Terminator
Yeah.
movies. Yeah, he
Yeah.
did the Terminator movies. Um, a lot of he has this famous quote where he's describing Sarah Connor, and he's basically talking about that. He says it in different words, but he's essentially saying that he thinks Sarah Connor is a great female character because she has like male qualities, essentially. And that a lot of like bros for any
Hmm.
fandom online, they like female characters that act like men, where they
Yes.
don't like show emotion. They are just like big and strong and tough and have cool muscles and just do cool tricks and
Cool fighting
whatever.
abilities. Yeah.
Yeah, and are just there. Like and don't show their feelings, don't talk about their emotions, don't make them like actually think about feelings and all that kind of stuff. That's what they like. They like some of them like Ahsoka
Hmm.
because she's more like that. And so, in at least in the version of her as an adult, she's more like that. They didn't like her when she was like when she first showed up in the Clone Wars. They all hated Ahsoka because she was a young 14, 15-year-old girl that was like expressing her emotions. As she got older, they took away her emotions some and a good amount. And so now they like her. But that's
Hmm.
all it is with Rey is that because she's an actual person who shows her feelings, they don't like her and they want her to be like a stiff upper lip person, but that's also not Star Wars. Like
Yeah.
Luke is not that at all. At all. Anakin definitely isn't like that either.
Hmm.
Who is even like that? I don't even know. Like nobody's
Yeah.
like that.
It's
Like
kind of
Leia's
like,
not like that. Han's not like that. Nobody is.
isn't it kind of one of the overall points of that was the downfall of the Jedi is that they thought they had to remove all emotion and connection to people and
Yeah.
like, yeah, so you're missing the point. Point went right over your head.
Yeah, like that you so Mandy sent me this reel of it was a Star Wars podcast, I think,
Hmm.
and they were talking about like, oh, if Anakin became a Jedi Master, wouldn't have everything stopped? Like, wouldn't he have not killed everybody? And I was like, that is. I went on this whole rant with her because I was like, this is so like tiny minded. Like, I don't mean to sound be like those people are stupid, but it's just a thing of like you're literally taking things at face value and not thinking about them at all in a way that
Hmm.
is extremely frustrating because like obviously no, the entire point of the prequel movies is that the Jedi were completely lost. They like the whole reason why Anakin turns into the person that he is because of who the Jedi are. Like the Jedi went to a planet with a bunch of slaves on it and never went back to the planet to rescue any of them, and they didn't think that that would affect Anakin. knowing that
Yeah.
his mom was still back on his home planet being a slave and nobody bothered to go save his mother or anyone else there. And it's like that kind of idea that they're only doing the things that like a government that is corrupt is telling them to do. And so they're literally being cops. Like they're always cops, but they're especially cops in the prequel trilogy where they're towing the line. They're like the establishment. They're like only helping the government that's in charge, and the government that's in charge is extremely bad. And they're not like doing the things that you should do, which is why everything fell apart the way that they did. Like so to say that like, oh, if they just made him a Jedi Master, he wouldn't have killed everybody. I'm like, the whole reason he, like, that may have been the thing in the movie that he did it for, but the whole
Yeah.
reason that Anakin did that is because of how he, like, what he went through training and how he was treated and all that by Jedis for like his entire life and just who he was as a person. If it wasn't, they first off, they never would have made him a Jedi Master anyway because he was like he should not have been one. He was very volatile and in general, even before all of the crazy murder happens.
Hmm.
And so he shouldn't have been one anyway. And then on top of it, even if they would never make him one because of that, but they also would never make him one because of how they look at the Force and that very like unemotional scientific like let's talk about philosophy in a really unemotional way that all of the Jedi are. And so because of that, they would never make somebody like Anakin a Jedi Master because he's the polar opposite of it. The Force is a very emotional thing for him. They were always shaming him for that. Instead of helping him like learn how to control those emotions, they were just telling him to turn them off.
Hmm.
And so they would never make him a Jedi Master because that was the opposite of what they wanted the Force to be. And also, he always would have exploded because no matter what, they would have tried to shame him for that stuff over and over and over again, and something would have happened that made him freak out like that. And
Yeah.
so it's just like such a simple way to look at it, of like act like, oh yeah, if he just got what he wanted, then everything would stop. Like, oh yeah, because totally when maniacal people are doing horribly abusive things, if you just give them what they want, they obviously just stop being abusive. That's literally never happened in the history of the world.
Yeah. Well, and also it's ignoring the fact that that may have been the last straw, but Anakin was extremely groomed. And he was extremely groomed. He was able to be extremely groomed because he was taken away from his support system and because he was surrounded by these people who didn't care to love him. And like I know that there's a certain sect of people that think Qui-Gon could have been that for him, and I am one of them, I'll admit it. Like Qui-Gon
Mm-hmm.
doesn't seem to be like the rest of the Jedi Council.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like, yeah, this guy missed an opportunity on every single parental figure he could have had. He ends up with a pseudo brother raising him, and like Palpatine just steps in and is like, "I'm your daddy."
Yeah. Yeah, like that's it's just I don't even know. Star Wars is just such a Star Wars bros are the most frustrating people on the planet because they're basically walking hypocrites all the time, but they don't acknowledge that they are, and so you feel like you're losing your mind when
Hmm.
you like point out this like thing that is obscenely obvious to everybody else, but they like won't say it, and then when you bring it up, they act like you're like a crazy out of control person for bringing up this extremely obvious fact. And
Yeah.
you're like, what are we doing? And so you just stop talking to them and just let them yell about Legends books in the corner for
Hmm.
the rest of their life because like that's honestly an alt-right pipeline in Star Wars is just the Legends books and what
Yeah.
you think about them. That's why I always talk about how nostalgia is used for that kind of stuff because that's how the Legends books were used. Nobody cared about the Legends books before they said that they weren't going to. They still publish them, like they still put out new versions of them with like new covers and things like that for people who like to collect them. They just stopped making more from like the company that they used during those years.
Hmm.
They just switched over to Del Rey, and that's the company that they use now to publish Star Wars books. They just changed like the publishing company. That's it. And they act like something has been stolen from them. But it's like they still publish the books. You can still find new versions in stores. They haven't like disappeared or anything like that. They haven't taken them off the shelves. They haven't like told you that you're not allowed to like them, they still even put out like some things with like they've made like some Legends characters like Thrawn and things like that have shown up in the TV shows that are out now. And so it's like it's not like they're ignoring that they happened. They just stopped making new stories with them because they wanted to start fresh with something different when a new company bought Star Wars. But they act like they like brought all the Legends books in the middle of a giant fire and they just burned them in front of them while they all cried or something. And I like I said, like if you want to like do like Star Wars cred, I started reading the Legends novels in 1999.
Mhm.
1999. I was 14. I started reading them at that age because the first prequel movie came out that year. And so I was excited about seeing a new Star Wars movie for the first time in my lifetime that I hadn't seen before.
Mhm.
And I was at our local bookstore and saw all of them, and I had no idea until that moment that there were Star Wars novels. And my mom told me to go buy some because she's nice and she knows that I liked Star Wars.
Mhm.
And so I bought some and then spent the next like 7 years of my life reading them, like all the time in between Harry Potter and like
Yeah.
other books and stuff too. But I read them all the time. I would stay up until like 2:30 in the mornings on the weekends when I was in high school, which is really late for like a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
Reading those books. Like I've read every single book that the Legends people usually talk about. Like some of the newer ones I didn't read because I couldn't afford to buy them at a certain point, because it was too poor, and I like didn't have a way to get to a library. And I don't think those apps that exist now exist where you can get a library card and get like books online on your phone and things like that. But I don't think I knew that if they did exist, I didn't know that they were there. But like most of the books, Legends books at this point, I have read because I went back and read a bunch of them when
Mhm.
Disney bought Star Wars because I just wanted to read some of them. And so like if any Legends people ever argue with me and I'm like, who are you arguing with? I read these books the same time that you did. You
Yeah.
can't beat me.
And it's also possible to like we had this discussion about fan fiction with Jean where like it doesn't diminish the fact that it's a good piece of writing that you love that it's fan fiction.
No.
And so even if some of that stuff didn't get canonized, doesn't get used in the movies or the shows now, like it's still there for you to enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I think is funny with fandom with like men in fandom
Hmm.
is how they will find a way to rename things instead of just calling it fan fiction. Because
Hmm.
they have this idea in their head that fan fiction is bad, like RPG video games or like especially RPG games in general is fan fiction.
Hmm.
Like cosplay, fan fiction. You making those like skit videos of your favorite characters acting out scenes, that's fan fiction.
Hmm.
Like it's all fan fiction. There's nothing wrong with it. You just think there's something wrong with it because you think only teenage girls read and write that stuff.
Yeah.
But there's that it's all fan fiction. Legends books are fan fiction. A lot of things out there are. It doesn't mean that they're not good
Hmm.
and that you can enjoy it. Just like get over the misogyny for one day in your life, and you would actually be able to just enjoy these things without like being so like caught up in it all. Like just let yourself actually enjoy something for what it is instead of putting yourself through this mess, um, because you like can't allow yourself to just enjoy it.
Okay, so our second topic we wanted to talk today, this is the heavy one. We wanted to
Mm.
talk about Zoe Laverne and like the grooming, the grooming allegations being now confirmed. I mean, it's been out there. It's been out there since 2020. And I remember at the time seeing peaks of it here and there. Like I remember seeing people making a big deal of the video where she's like, what's so wrong with a 19-year-old wanting to date a 13-year-old?
Mhm.
Um, and like I do remember that, but I didn't know who she was. Like I am not into the younger TikTok influencers in that way. Like maybe a couple of them that I watch, but not really. It's not like I'm out here watching the D'Amelios and stuff. Um, yeah, so I had no idea who she was. It was just like, well, she seems shitty. Okay, bye.
Yeah, most of the like younger influencer people or anything like that, I've obviously never seen before. The only time I do see them is because of Percy Jackson kids, like kids in the Percy Jackson fandom, like talking or referencing them in videos, or sometimes seeing those videos because fans of Percy Jackson are watching them, and so I end up seeing them. One of somebody I've followed online for a long time, her name's Kalela. I've been following her on YouTube since 2017, and she would do videos every once in a while talking about Gabby Hanna and like what she says about ADHD.
Hmm.
And I was like, I don't know, I've never heard of Gabby Hanna before, but I heard of her through how she would talk about her, so it made me want to know like what is actually going on with this person.
Yeah.
And then because of that, I started seeing all these other video essays about all the other kind of like younger influencer people. And so one came up about Zoe, and I think like the thumbnail probably called her a predator or something, but it's YouTube. Like sometimes people say things like that, but they're like
It's clickbait.
exaggerating,
Yeah.
or they're not being serious or whatever. And so I started watching the video, and I know that I didn't finish the whole thing because I would never have been able to do it. But I watched enough of it to like see that like, oh, she actually is a predator.
Hmm.
And it was like wild reading the comments and seeing like kids talking about like how they all knew that this was going on, but it was just like happening online.
Hmm.
Everyone could see it, but it didn't seem like there was like a clear, I don't, none of them knew what to do. And that's really like the thing, like with overall, like on our YouTube channel, we've talked about grooming a lot. Like I've posted like photo things on my TikTok channel that is just screenshots of all the different videos we've made about grooming. Like we
Hmm.
talked about it when Andrew Alvarez was being a fucking weirdo
Yeah.
with like Percy Jackson fans. We talked about it. That made us do an entire like 2 hour and 45 minute episode just about grooming. We've like the video that we made about Artemis grooming still gets views on YouTube like every single week.
Hmm.
The like Andrew Alvarez ones still do. Like every video we've ever made about somebody grooming somebody gets videos every week somehow, because people obviously find that idea somewhat interesting, because I think people want to understand
Hmm.
like what it is, how it really works, and then more importantly like what to do when it happens, because especially with kids online, there's so many ways that it can happen to you. Is that a lot of times they're kind of just talking about what happened, but they're not really telling anybody like what to do if something like this happens again, or like if you start hearing something about her doing this sort of thing with other kids, because that's likely highly probable that she would
Hmm.
like what do you do then, because whatever you did before didn't like work. And so I want to, at least for us to try to do that, to try to give people like actionable, like actually actionable steps that you can do if you see somebody that you think might be in this situation. So the next time it does happen like this, because it will happen again in this sort of way, because it just happens with, especially with kids, and people that they look up to online, at least maybe some people will have an idea of what to do instead of just feeling like frozen or trapped, or just not having any clue what to do, because nobody actually gives good advice. Just in case there's anyone who watches us who doesn't know about this story
Yeah.
yet, basically what happened is there were a lot of videos of Zoe Laverne on her TikTok channel that had 20 million subscribers then, and I'm pretty sure still does now. She started posting videos of her with this literal child that was 12.
13,
He
12
like
at the
turned
time. Yeah.
13 at a certain age in them, but 12 to 13 years old, and she was like doing like kissing him in some of them, or talking about wanting, like talking about dating him, talking about moving to his like town where he lived, and he is a tiny little baby because he is 12 or 13, and he looks, I don't know if it's just that every 12 to 13-year-old looks that young, or if it's that he also just looks really young, but
Hmm.
they're so tiny. And like seeing him in these videos where she is like kissing him or jumping on top of him or just
Yeah.
in a room alone with him at all, doing like these TikTok videos you would see like couples do in things like that are supposed to be more adult is so scary. I like forced myself to watch some of them because I was like, Connor made a video on YouTube that I'll link for sure in our description when we post this, where he put all of those together so that people could, you know, just see like the evidence of it.
Hmm.
And I was like, if he forced himself to watch all of these to edit them together in this way to post this in a video, I'm going to at least try to watch some of them, because that would be really, really hard to watch yourself and
Yeah.
going through that stuff now knowing what was happening to you. And so at the time, Zoe tried to act like, oh, we just kissed, and then we realized that the age thing was too big of a problem. That's basically how she put it, and that they like broke up. But she like oh god. But he recently in that video on YouTube and other TikTok videos, some of them have been got taken down, which is why he did the YouTube video, since so that it wouldn't get taken down. In the video that he made it abundantly clear that she raped him. Just
Hmm.
in case there was anybody that like thought that didn't happen. When I saw that, at some point when I watched like the video essay about it in 2020, I
Hmm.
stopped watching because I was like, she raped that kid, and I can't handle like the knowing that, and
Yeah.
knowing that she's doing that and that she's gonna get away with it, because duh. Like
Yeah.
most people who do that kind of stuff get away with it, even when you fit kind of the person that people imagine who would do things like that to people, they still get away with it most of the time.
Laverne, it has to be acknowledged, there's pretty privilege at play here. You know,
Oh
there's a
yeah.
lot of people that just automatically dismissed her as more harmless because she is a conventionally attractive girl. And I want to say, like, I even would lump her in. I know Colleen Ballinger and Gabby Hanna, people will make the stupid distinction of they never assaulted anybody physically. But they were also having very sexually inappropriate conversations with minors in group chats, on live streams, and, you know, like private chats with people where it's like we all dismissed those ones a little bit too easily. Gabby Hanna, especially, she should have
Hmm.
gotten the same amount of smoke that Colleen got with her group chats.
Yeah.
But yeah, like,
I wanted to say about that, like I was watching an old Gabby Hanna video today from that I watched back in like 2020 or
mhm,
something, that I haven't seen in a long time. And every once in a while I try to watch a video where they actually show clips of her talking. I usually can't handle it for too long,
yeah,
but I this one I was trying, and one of the clips they showed was her talking about, it was the video series she did in 2021 that she never finished, think because Jessie Smiles just finally destroyed her for good.
mhm,
But one of the early videos, she was talking about when people made videos about her stealing jokes and
mhm,
things like that. And she made this offhand comment in the video that she looked up the person's information behind the YouTube channel, found like their address and their
mhm,
school and where they worked. And she just like mentioned it in a very like talked really fast when she said it, as if like, oh, don't, like almost as like trying to make light of it. And the person who made the video was talking about that to show like these were signs that like years before things got really bad with her, that is wildly inappropriate for her to be doing, to be like stalking basically like younger guys that just happen to realize that she stole jokes from famous comedians.
mhm.
Whoa. And so that, but that's, yeah, Zoe Laverne is definitely somebody who, I feel like this has become like a weird niche within our niche of us talking about male victims.
Yeah,
But it is like a thing that's why we focused a lot on like Calypso and how that happened in Epic and in Percy Jackson so far. Whoever wherever else she shows up, it will be the same kind of deal. And also, there's just so many stories like that. And because a lot of times people just subconsciously just don't take male victims as seriously for
Hmm.
one reason or another. They just don't. It's always hard to come forward no matter what when there's any sort of like inappropriate behavior, even if it's not like sexual. Grooming happens in not sexual conditions. It happens in like any situation where somebody can take advantage of you like that. Um, but it's always really hard to tell people about something like that because they just kind of have to believe you. And people don't want to believe that things like that can happen. And
Hmm.
people especially don't want to believe that things like that can happen to boys.
Yeah.
They just don't.
What broke my heart, especially with Connor, was he is so close in age, or was so close in age when it all happened to my son, that like genuinely seeing some of these videos of Zoe and Connor together hurt my soul. Yeah, so he talks about this in his story, but where I want to start, because where it seems like Zoe's grooming start is like the idea of somebody interacting with their fans on such a personal level. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's unusual. It is very unusual. I mean, we have people who do reach out to us from doing this podcast and making the content we do, but we're not sitting there telling them all of our current demons in any way that we're not posting publicly.
But there's this one kid, I'm pretty sure kid that's still in high school that has liked all of the every single Percy Jackson video I have ever posted ever since
Hmm.
December of 2023. This child has liked and favorited every single one. They favorited one of them today.
Yep.
Like it's like literally almost every day. And that kid, I because they've been following me for so long, we're mutuals on TikTok, and so every once in a while they'll accidentally send me a Sonic edit.
Yep.
Extent of what I do with it is they tell me something that they like on accident, and I just ask them questions about it because I just think it's fun to ask kids about like why they like something.
Yeah.
Not in like a dangerous way. If I started messaging them and telling them like, oh, I don't like Mandy anymore, or
Oh my
like
gosh, yeah.
whatever, like something dramatic like that, or like started talking to them about like personal things that were going on in my life that I was like having problems with, or like, oh, my boss was an asshole today at work or something, that would be extremely inappropriate. I don't do that. And so that's like that kind of conversations with people you look up to or whatever is okay, because there's very clear boundaries.
Hmm.
We only talk about things that are involving the things that we're talking about. Like the kids that message us, I don't even know most of their names.
Yeah,
Like I don't
I only
know.
know them by username most of the
Yeah,
time.
we usually talk about Percy Jackson, and so there are some like people in the general Percy Jackson sphere, like in the cast or like siblings of some of like the main cast that follow fan accounts. Um, and I don't think that those people did that like maliciously. And they just wanted to like support this like young fan who was just
Hmm.
talking to them. But it can get things can become very weird in ways that you can't really fully control because you don't know how the other person who feels parasocially attached to you feels about you and like what they're going to do or what they're going to say. Like ironically, because I brought him up before, the Andrew Alvarez thing
Hmm.
is actually a good example of that where he followed some Percy Jackson fan accounts like the other cast members did, but it was innocuous. It was fine. It wasn't anything bad. But then I don't know when this happened, but at some point, he started posting things that he had from the set, and he was like trying to sell them, and was trying to get fans to like buy them off of him, which like what like
Yeah.
that's not anything with like grooming, but that's also just like weird. That's kind of just like strange behavior to be like seeing all these people follow you and you're trying to like make money off of them by selling things that you had. And then the main things that he started doing was there was a couple fan accounts that he would be in DMs talking to, and he sent videos that he had of like Charlie, who was one of the people in the cast that was good friends with him.
Mhm.
He started sending videos that he had of Charlie just like working out like in the gym, like when they would go to the gym together and stuff. Like did he like take videos like that just to send to those fans? Because why else would he have those videos of Charlie like working out in the gym? That's like a weird thing to just have on your phone of like one of your friends. And
Yeah.
so it's just weird. It's He started sending videos of the cast who he has actual relationships with in real life, sending them to like fans who don't, so that they could use them in like TikTok edits that they wanted to post and things like that. And then at some point, he started sending pictures to some fans that were 14 when he was like 19 or 20 of
Yeah.
him swimming where he wasn't wearing a shirt and other things like that. And so it like accelerated at a pretty quick pace to a really weird place. And where like some of the 14-year-old fans were trying to explain away, like, oh, he was swimming, so that's why he sent that picture. And people trying to explain to them, like, it is never appropriate for a 19, 20-year-old man to be sending a picture of him shirtless to a 14-year-old girl, especially when they already idolize him for being a fan of him, for being a character that they love from a book series that they adore.
Mhm.
That, but especially with Snapchat, Snapchat is a demonic app when it comes to kids, because there's a lot of like sexual content that ends up happening on that app too. Especially because it can like disappear.
Yeah.
But also just in general, the way that people use Snapchat right now reminds me of like AOL chat rooms, in the way
Yes.
that there's a lot of people that like impersonate,
Mhm.
um, and it's really hard to know like who, like who is real or who's not, especially because when talking about the Percy Jackson things again, recently there were a couple like there's updates accounts that people have where it's usually teenagers, and some of them they just post whenever there's like a, you know, an article about whatever it is about like the show or one of the actors or something, or they show up at a premiere, they post pictures from it, things like that. Some of them will message the whoever it is, like the cast, family and friends and teachers and anyone who's ever met them before, to
Mhm.
try to get them to send them pictures of them that no one else has ever seen, because it's pictures from like their private life. And so there's a difference between them, and there were a couple accounts like the updates accounts that were out there, one for Walker and one for Charlie, that were both banned recently.
Mhm.
And whenever those people tried to like get their accounts back, they would get their account back for like a day and then they would ban it again. And so to me, the reason why those accounts were being banned were because they were likely contacting a lot of people around that actor
Yeah.
to try to get access to things. That's going to get your account banned for life. If you're going to do that long enough, they at some point have to take action, because you're that's a very stressful thing to know that anyone who ever like touches you or could possibly have access to you is getting messages like that from people. That's just a very difficult situation to know that that's happening.
Mhm.
But also they were posting a lot of pictures of them that likely wouldn't want like necessarily out there.
Yeah.
And so those two things connected together, those accounts got banned. But because those accounts were already out there, like you can't take back all the things that those accounts were posting before they got banned. And there's a lot of other accounts that are still up that do the same sort of thing.
Mhm.
All those pictures are out there, and so it's very easy now for people to pretend to be somebody who's famous in that way, especially if you're younger, because they can just use the pictures that the updates accounts have posted from stealing them from people who know them personally,
Mhm.
and just act like and impersonate them. And especially when you add AI to that,
Yeah.
it's very easy to do that. And so, like, for an example, like right after season one of Percy Jackson aired, Walker posted, which he like hardly ever does, on his Instagram story, saying that somebody was on Snapchat impersonating his little brother, who was 12 at the time.
Mhm.
And so somebody was impersonating his 12-year-old brother on Snapchat, and um, he talked about it in an interview before and said that the person tried to get his actual brother's account banned.
Oh my
And tried
gosh.
to act like he was the actual person or something. It was they obviously took care of it, but um on Walker doesn't post very much at all on social media. Like I wouldn't if I was him either. But on his social media like profiles, the only thing he has in his bio is on Instagram only account, saying like this is
Hmm.
the only account that I have. And on TikTok, I still don't have Snapchat and Be Real.
Hmm.
And the reason why he put that on there is because people were impersonating him and pretending to be him on those apps. And like, I told you this, but a little bit ago I saw some teenagers. I have no idea who these teenagers are, but they were doing like a podcast or a TV show or like a YouTube video, something like that, where they were filming themselves all talking. And
Hmm.
everyone in like the comments were, you know, young like middle school teenage kids, so they all knew who these people were. They asked like, have you ever met like Walker, because they mentioned him enough, I guess, on their show in some way.
Hmm.
And she was saying like, no, I've never met him before, but I have chatted with him before online. And she didn't even say like what app she was talking about that she would talk to him on. But I
Hmm.
was looking through all of the comments, and all the comments were like Walker fans being like, "Oh, Walker lied about having a Snapchat. Like, see, Walker lied about having Snapchat. He's probably
Yeah.
on there somewhere." And some of them were like defending him, like he obviously said that because he didn't want fans to be like bothering him when he's on there. And but I when I saw that, I was like, was she actually talking to him?
Yeah.
Because if she never met him, how does she know? Like
Yeah.
how do you know if you actually talk to him? You could have been talking to somebody pretending to be him and thought that it was him, because if it's just Snapchat like chatting or whatever, sending pictures like that, it would be very easy to just use like AI and like filters and stuff to try to make a picture look like the person took it and like sent it to you. Um
Hmm. Well, I mean,
and
let's be real here. Sometimes it's not even convincing. It's just the
mhm.
euphoria of thinking I'm talking to somebody
Mhm.
famous
Yeah.
that like takes over your critical thinking sometimes. And I'm not going to say I don't understand it. I mean, all of us like the idea that maybe sometime we could meet our favorite celebrities, you know? And also the fact that they do have public facing social media. I think it's just kind of an understood thing that all of us realize most likely they have other accounts they go on. Most likely they have some sort of personal account where it's for maybe friends and family or something like
Yeah.
that.
And I will say, like, the thing with that situation that gets complicated is that some of the other cast members do follow, like, fan accounts. And
Mhm.
so that just happening gives the idea that he could do that too.
Mhm.
And, or he could, like, talk to them in that way, which makes people try
Mhm.
to make it happen. And that's why he's never on the internet anymore, because I'm sure that kind of thing was happening a lot.
Yeah.
And that would be really overwhelming, and also just overwhelming to know that there are people like pretending to be you. Like if there are people like scammers pretending to be people on TikTok that have like 20,000 subscribers that nobody knows, there's
Mhm.
definitely a ton of scammers out there pretending to be Walker, who's a child actor who's famous and is the head of like a huge franchise that a lot of people would know. There's definitely a lot of people doing that kind of thing. Not only with him, but a lot of the other, I'm sure a lot of the other cast too. But still, it's just, it makes it a weird thing to try to figure out when other people involved in the show are doing that. And so it's like, how can he really definitively say that it's not really him when some of the other cast members are? And so it just leaves you in a weird place of like, you don't want to like make your fans feel like something that make them think something is going to happen that never will,
Mhm.
but you also like can't control what the other people around you are doing. But it just
Yeah.
like, who whenever somebody is like the star of whatever it is, everything always somehow goes back on them in some way. And so it's just a complicated like thing to try to figure out while you're also just a teenager.
Yeah.
um like the And of course, because there's like no boundaries with fans, especially when they're trying to do this stuff. There is recently an interview with the kids when they were at something. I don't remember what it was anymore. Oh, Disney Upfront that they last did together.
Mhm.
And one of the interviewers they were asking, like, do you see like the edits and things like that that people make on TikTok about Percy Jackson? And when I saw that, the first thing I thought of was like, okay, I'm probably not going to try to use Walker's picture in videos anymore, because he talked about seeing them and getting like scared when he sees his own face suddenly in the middle of the video. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to use that for a little while, just in case he does see
Yeah.
something. I don't want to scare the child. I want him to just be able to like watch Percy Jackson as a fan of it still, without like having to think about how he's in the spotlight of this thing. Just enjoy it for what it is. And so he was talking about how he gets like freaked out by seeing that sometimes. But in that conversation, the person interviewing them asked, like, "Oh, do you guys have like burner accounts that you guys look at these posts on?" Because obviously they, if they like liked them when, as themselves, the person making it would notice,
Yeah, right away.
and they would say something. Um, and that just puts a lot of pressure on what you're like trying to look at and enjoy when you're just trying to scroll on the internet. And
Mhm.
so, and the person asked them about it. Arian said that he doesn't have one because it's too much of a hassle. And while he was answering that, Walker just kind of like looked away and said something about like, oh, like burner accounts are like almost too much work, so like don't do it. But like the way that he answered it, that obviously makes anyone think that he does have one. And I would hope that he has one for his own sanity, that he has a way to like engage with the internet without having to worry about people like perceiving him in that way. Everyone deserves time to just like exist on the internet and just have fun with it without having to worry that people are gonna like report on every single thing you do.
Mhm.
Um, and so, but either way, after that happened, like I was like, oh God, now that they said that, people are gonna try to find those accounts somewhere. And like 4 days later, I saw somebody on Twitter saying that, oh, somebody on TikTok posted saying that they figured out all of their burner accounts, and they were like convinced that they figured out who they were. And I
Oh my
was like, oh
gosh.
my God. I'm like, I tried to like find the post just to try to find it to see like what they even said. And in the hopes that it wasn't there, I couldn't find it. And so I'm hoping that whoever posted it, that people reported it enough that it got taken down. Um,
Mhm.
but just overall, that's just a precarious situation. And whenever I see like the story with Zoe, where she's like this huge influencer that started befriending these like tiny little kids that were her fans, and like just dumping all of her emotions all over them, and grooming them and making them feel competitive with each other, so they wouldn't really talk to each other and realize what was really going on for a long time. And
Mhm.
it just reminds me of not only like child's like people on the internet that are kids that like the kind of stuff that we talk about because it's geared towards kids, but also like the kids that are in it.
Mhm.
Because just because kids are like famous doesn't mean that they stop being kids. They
Yeah.
can be used and exploited the same way that anyone else can, and I don't want that to happen to them at all. And so, and that when I see that stuff, I just worry that there's kids out there who think that they have talked to a famous person that have like used and abused them when it actually was somebody pretending to be them the entire time. Um,
Yeah.
and it's like, how do you prove that? Like, how do you prove that that wasn't you? Um,
Yeah, well,
it's
with
impossible.
celebrities, it's almost always catfishes, right? But in the case of Zoe Laverne and Colleen Ballinger and Gabby Hanna, they were literally actually talking to these people. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like the lesson here needs to be like there's a reason celebrities are a little bit untouchable in a way, or they should be anyway. I know they're not as much in the age of social media, but it is that power imbalance. It is like a little weird that you, as a young fan, are talking to this person that you care about a lot that has no idea who you are.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be that way, you know? Like fans have avenues to meet their favorite people. It's usually like meet and greets and stuff like that, which I know can be hard to get to for people like Walker. You know, like it might be hard to get to a Disney event or something that he's at, But at the same time, those are the safe ways to talk to the people that you care about. Somebody like Zoe Laverne, who is a who's an actual influencer, they also have meet and greets sometimes. Not only through conventions, but like they at least but pre-pandemic they used to host them. I'm sure there's some that still do. Um, but the idea of being in these group chats with people, whether they be like famous or internet famous, it's just not a safe place to be, first of all. And any person with more power than you like that, that is using you to vent their problems, probably needs a therapist and not you. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's really the bottom line. Like Colleen Ballinger should not have been talking about her divorce with like 13-year-old fans. Zoe Laverne should not have been talking about sex and getting drunk in front of people. Like, and that's not even going into detail of what she did with Connor. But like those types of things are usually kept from kids for a reason. You know, with my own son, the only social media he has access to that I don't monitor a lot is YouTube, and that's because I know which YouTube channels he watches. Like, theoretically, I could go on my phone. I'm logged into his YouTube account too. I could switch accounts and go and look and see where is he commenting, what is he watching. He knows that. He knows that
Mm-hmm.
I have that power. He knows that, like, any sort of messaging he has. I can do that if I really wanted to. But we've created an environment where we trust each other that, like, I don't feel the need to do that on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I don't know. The idea that you're having these secret chats that you have to hide from your parents, that you have to, like, I don't know, like, there's so much about the Zoe Laverne thing. So, two victims of hers had, or three, because I found another one that was a girl, but it's not in the same way. Um, I want to say her name was Kaylin, and then we have Connor, who's like the big one, the one that she actually had a pretty much a relationship with, or tried to. And Hasiel is another young man who was more of a fan page that she treated like a best friend, little brother type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows if that would have crossed romantic bounds had she gotten as much access to him as she did Connor, because she tried to get this kid alone in a hotel room to smoke weed with her. Like,
Yeah, that definitely would have happened if he was not smart and his friend didn't go with him.
yeah,
Um,
that's the way he protected himself because, like, of course, any kid's gonna be like, "Oh, cool, I get to meet with my favorite influencer," right? But brought a friend along with him, which kept him safe because she never got him alone. And she did have people from her team on, like, with her on that trip, but they were enabling her. Nobody was like, "Why are we going to New York to visit this 13-year-old?" What? Like,
yeah, like why are you hanging out with a 13-year-old when you're 22
mhm.
at that age? Why are you like she texted him at like 1 o'clock in the morning asking him to come to her hotel room to like drink and smoke and stuff. And he came with his friend, and she immediately wanted to like leave when she saw that his friend was there. And
Mhm.
it's like that is just wildly. There's no good reason for why something like that would be happening. There's no like innocent reason for what could ever put you in a situation where you would want to do something like that, like where you would want to talk to somebody that young in that way where they call you their friend when there's no way that you could ever actually be friends with them because of the clear like power imbalance and like age disparity and just all those other things we could list off. Like I don't like blame any of those kids for feeling like they were friends with her because she made them feel like that,
Mhm.
but they couldn't be because of just how much more she knew about what was going on. Like one of the girl that you mentioned that ran like a fan account, she mentioned that she went to like a party or something like that with Zoe where her mom was there, and Zoe lied to her mom and told her that she was 16 when she was actually 13.
Yeah.
And at the time she didn't think it was that big of a deal because when you're that young, you don't understand the like maturity level difference between when you're 13 and when you're 16, and there's so much changes when it comes to like that kind of stuff in those ages. And in a way that doesn't happen quite the same way at any other age in your life when you're a teenager.
Hmm.
Um, and so she didn't think it was anything at the time, but now she looks back at that when she is now 19 and like can't imagine her wanting to want to be around somebody that was as young as she was
Hmm.
around Zoe when Zoe was older than she is now.
Yeah.
The thing I wanted to mention about Zoe though too is that you mentioned like um, keeping chats like a secret. Some of them weren't a secret from their
Hmm.
parents.
Yeah, some of the
Like
parents knew.
some of the parents knew. Like usually the two boys, Connor and what
Haciel.
Hasiel, they both said that she talked to their parents, and their parents knew that they were meeting this girl. Like Connor described it as like, he was a young 12, 13-year-old kid who didn't have any friends at school and was bullied a lot, and so his parents were just glad that he was meeting this person on the internet that he really liked and looked up to and stuff, and that it was helping him like make friends, and he was happy about it. And so when your kid is struggling with that kind of stuff, I can understand why you would just be happy that they were seemingly finding like some sort of community. um
Hmm.
I will give his parents credit though, from how he described it, that his parents realized though that when he stopped seeing a lot of the friends he had and she moved to his hometown
Yeah.
and he didn't see any of his friends anymore, he didn't really see like his family the way that he used to and things like that, they realized that something was wrong. And that definitely helped him a lot, that they realized that something was wrong, so that when he also realized that something was wrong, it gave him like an easy way to get out of that situation, in a way that like if parents didn't realize or still thought that it was fine, it would have been a lot harder. But yeah, both of their parents met her, and that's one of the I always think this, one of the frustrating things about grooming stuff is that the things that people do who are trying or like starting that process with somebody, that's also the things that people do when they're just like a nice person and they're not trying to
Hmm.
hurt you. And so there's no like clear definitive way you can be like, if you do this one thing that means that that person is trying to groom you, because it's like, yeah, like an adult like offering to speak to somebody's parents who is a younger kid that is talking to you, um, that is something that you should do. Like if any of the kids that we talk to, their parents wanted to talk to us, I would talk to them and without a problem, and I would do whatever they said. Like if they wanted me to stop talking to them, I would stop talking to them,
Hmm.
and like that would be the end of it. But like if they wanted to talk to me because they just wanted to for whatever reason, I would talk to them, of course. Or like anybody, any adult in their life, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I like anything that I say to anyone that I talk to online, even people in like their 20s and stuff, I say it knowing that somebody could like somebody else could look at this, or somebody
Hmm.
else could see this or share it or whatever, and I'm okay with knowing that I like have that in my mind, that anything I say in that way, people could show it or share it to somebody else. I know it's not like a private conversation completely, in
Hmm.
the same way that it would be between people who actually know each other and things like that. And so like that is something that adults do when they're trying to be actually like, you know, respect boundaries and respect the kid, respect the people in their life that take care of that child, things like that. But with Zoe, she was doing it, in the end they eventually figured out that she was doing it to try to like get like an in with these kids. And so it's harder than if the kid starts feeling uncomfortable if
Hmm.
their parents know the person and they like the person, because
Yeah, because then
kids,
they're like, oh, they're harmless. Oh, I talked
yeah.
to them. They seem nice.
And like also like kids, I remember feeling like this when I was a teenager, but I feel like a lot of times when you're a teenager, especially if you have a hard time making friends, and like I didn't have any friends when I was a teenager, so I know this intimately, is that like you don't like telling like the parent that, if you have a parent that's nice to you, like my mom was the nice one, um, you don't like having to tell them when like somebody isn't your friend anymore,
Yeah.
because your parent like wants you to make friends, they want you to be okay, and so you don't want to like almost like disappoint them in some way, you don't want them to worry about you, so you don't want to have to admit that we're not actually friends anymore, or that person wasn't somebody I want to be around anymore, sort of thing. And so you're more likely to just let your parents believe that you're still friends, even if you're not.
Yeah.
Um, because you just don't want them to be sad, and you don't want them to ask what happened and go through that whole thing. And so, her knowing their parents and especially the parents had like a somewhat positive idea about them, would make it hard for them to like go to them when something became weird. But then also it's like a built-in thing that like if the parents start realizing, like Connor's parents did, that something is off, then there's like an automatic person that you can use as like a way to isolate them further by being like they just don't understand us,
Hmm.
and act like somebody turned them against you or something. And
Yeah.
so it's like if there's somebody that's just being a good person, they don't do those sort of things. Um, they just don't. Like if somebody shows up and is like, I don't want you to talk to this person anymore because of this, and this, you might go to that person and tell them what that person said, but you're not going to like force the issue because you don't want to make somebody's life worse.
Hmm.
If you do force the issue anyway and like turn it into a dramatic soap opera experience, then there's something else going on there. But yeah, adults, anyone of any age that's like more than like 3 or 4 years older than teenagers, especially,
Hmm.
should not be coming to them and being like, "Oh, my boyfriend broke up with me. How do I get him back?" Um,
Yeah. Or I'm sad, you know?
I'm sad that they broke up with me, and especially considering that the boyfriend she was talking about broke up with her when he saw what she was doing with Connor,
Yeah, I was like, this is weird.
and was like immediately goodbye. Like the whole reason that she gave for why she moved to Connor's hometown, which is across the country from where she lived, was because her boyfriend broke up with her. And like that fits because the boyfriend has made videos supporting Connor now that he's said things. And
Hmm.
he said like, yeah, we broke up a couple weeks before we ever said anything about it on the internet, which that's mostly true about anybody. Usually
Yeah.
when something like that happens, you don't exactly run to the internet to tell everybody right away. You wait until you figure out how you feel about it first.
Yeah.
And so yeah. And so as soon as, and that fits with the time of the first time she ever like interacted with Connor, that's like the reaction you should have of like, what are you doing hanging out with this 12-year-old child in this way? This is inappropriate and weird. If you're okay with this, I don't want to be around you anymore. And her reaction was to move across the country by that child because that
Yeah.
child was like doing whatever she wanted. And that boyfriend told her no. That's really how simple it is with people like that. They just want they want somebody who won't tell them no. And I
Yeah.
guess that's like my basic point overall, like when we go into like grooming like advice, is that I just want people to know that people who do this stuff, they're not necessarily like attracted to children the way that people describe it. They want somebody who can't tell them no and will
Hmm.
just do whatever they want. And so yes, usually people like that do that with children because children are a group of people that don't have the maturity and developmental just abilities in their brain and also life experience to realize when somebody is manipulating them or lying to them in the way that people who are older do. And so it's easier to get those things from children. And so a lot of times people who want those things go to children, but they don't go to children because they like want to date children. Like Zoe was not dating Connor. Like Connor
Yeah.
thought she was dating him because he was 13. But she was not dating him. She was preying on him. She
Hmm.
was raping him. That's not that's not dating. That's You're not dating somebody when you're just abusing them and they're too young and innocent to realize that you are yet. And so
Yeah.
that's something about that I wish the people would understand, is that they're not like attracted to you in that way. They don't want to date you. They don't even want to be friends with you. That's why people who are in relationships can do these other things with other people at the same time and feel no remorse,
Hmm.
because that relationship they have is the romantic relationship they have. This other thing they're doing is just purely using somebody to feel better.
Yeah.
They're not the same. They don't have any attraction to the other person. They have zero. They're just using them for their ego.
Hmm.
They don't actually care about that person is basically like a blank slate of something that they just use in the way that they want to. And they're obviously not really a blank slate, they're a person. But that's how people who do that kind of stuff, that's how they look at you. That's why people who get married can do things like that. Like a lot of stories about teachers have been happening for some reason recently. A lot of female teachers in like where I live especially have had stories like that come out, and a lot of them are married. And a lot of times people are like, how are they married when they're doing something like that with kids? And it's like, because the stuff they do with kids has nothing to do with their
Yeah, it's
marriage.
not romantic. I mean, Mary Kay Letourneau is like the biggest famous case from when we were younger.
Hmm.
And she was married at the time. She was married and had her own children. She did go on to have an actual romantic relationship, which is rare, but like, yeah, that's a good point. And I was trying to think about like from a parent's perspective. Say one of William's favorite influencers just happened to message me and be like, "I'm friends with your son. Can I hang out with him?" You know, I don't know that I would say no necessarily, um, but I would say no to unsupervised. I would say no to them having any unsupervised access. You want to
Hmm.
hang out with him, you play on Twitch with him, where a bunch of people can watch. Or you want to meet up with him in real life, when are you having a meet and greet? Can I come? Like, and if the answer is no, you cannot come, then no, my son, I cannot come. Like he's not going anywhere where you think it's bad for me to be there.
Hmm.
Like even doctors and dentists who say that I get red flags from of
Oh
like,
yeah,
we don't want you to come back here because kids freak out more when their parents are here. Sorry, that's
you're a
bullshit.
liar.
I'm sorry. Yeah. And so
That like,
like
well, okay. One
yeah.
thing, one caveat with that I will say is that um, I feel like there's always like an abuse contradiction to everything that I say,
Hmm.
because when I was growing up and I would go to the doctor, my mom would always be in there with me, and there were times when I wish that I could have told the doctor what was actually going on, but she
Hmm.
was always in there with me, and so I couldn't I couldn't say anything.
Yeah,
And
that's
there
a
are
different thing. Like
yeah,
when
there are
doctors are like, "Do you
situations
want your parent out of the room for this?" That's
yeah.
different. But you
Yeah,
can't be
like
there
there
the entire appointment? No, no.
yeah. That's why like I always try to give like the abuse caveat that like it's always good to like keep in mind that sometimes when mandatory reporters are doing stuff like that, it's because they're just trying to get a kid alone. It really
Yes.
depends on the parent, but when you are like a good and involved parent, a doctor wanting you to just be not there for the entire appointment is a little different
Hmm.
than normal. I will say that like obviously kind of like the overall purpose of us doing this whole thing is to try to make stuff for people, kids that are like us when we were especially teenagers,
Hmm.
so that they have something that is like my entire like life since like 2020 when I stopped wanting to die all the time has been trying to think of ways to reach people that are actively kids that are actively going through abuse right now and give them information that will help them realize what's happening to them so they don't have to wait as long as I did, and they can get some kind of help and comfort until they like are able to get away from their family. And so
Hmm.
this is just another way to do that. And so with that, like I always thought about like if we ever get like more viewership and things like that, kids could start to want to talk to us or message us or just want advice. Like that happens every once in a while, but it could happen more if more people see the things we make. That could happen more. And
Hmm.
because of how I am, I've already thought all of that all of that through already. And the way that I thought of that is like I would never talk to any of them without it being something that I could record and
Hmm.
like save and keep in like a Google Drive with like their name on it and send it to whatever parent or adult that is like a safe adult. Obviously, some of these situations their parents wouldn't be the safe adult, but whatever safe adult person is in their life, if they would want access to it, I would send it to them and show them every single time I ever talk to them to show that like you can look at literally everything that I've ever said to them ever.
Hmm.
If you can't look through their phone or whatever and do it that way, just look at it here because I don't want anything not being saved that way because that's really the only way to prove to people in that person's life that you're not doing anything inappropriate, because especially if there are people in their life that are harming them, it's very easy to make somebody that's trying to be helpful but like twist their words around to try to make it look like they're actually a bad person. Because like I said, Zoe did the same thing that we do, where we tell people, we just talk to people about the basic things. We would talk to parents. If like a kid needed help and they wanted us to talk to their parents, we would talk to their parents. And she did that too. And so it's when you're trying to find something wrong with somebody because you don't like what they're telling somebody in your life, it's very easy to try to make them look like the bad person.
Yeah.
And so the only way to really ever completely stop that from happening is if you have some sort of documentation that that person can go back and look at. Because I used to do that with people in my own life. I would save like conversations I had with people and then go back over the years and reread through them and be like, oh, okay, now I understand more of what was going on here than I did a couple years ago. But that's like already a plan like in my mind for something that hasn't even happened yet. But it's just, that's like, I would never go on Discord ever. Because Discord has this function where you can do a voice chat with somebody and it's not recorded. And once the voice chat is done, and unless you're like screen recording the entire thing, it just disappears. There's no way for it to be saved. So that app is dangerous, and so I would never use it. In the same way that Snapchat messages, especially like pictures, have like a time limit on them. And so if you don't like screenshot them, and usually on Snapchat when they screenshot something, they get a notification that you did that. And so that makes people then not want to do that if they're in a situation where they feel afraid of what the other person would think if they did that. And so a lot of things on Snapchat can also disappear. So it's a lot harder to prove what actually happened, and what somebody said to you and what they didn't because of that function. Like, what's his name?
James
the guy
Charles?
from the Ace Family.
Oh no. Oh yeah.
He makes a lot of money by posting on
Austin.
Snapchat, but he was like approaching OnlyFans models to try to be their pimp on Snapchat. He was finding them on there.
The biggest red flag of Snapchat to me is that everybody who has been canceled goes like, because like David Dobrik is also on there.
Yeah.
So it's a red flag place in general. And us, like, we have our own measures we do to make sure that we're staying accountable to when we have these conversations. We're not saying don't ever go on those platforms we're talking about, but it should be a red flag if someone only wants to talk to you in a way that it disappears. You know, like, I know vanish mode exists on Instagram. We only ever accidentally do it because it's like if you scroll up and you go past your messages, it'll turn on. We've only ever turned that on for each other when it's like, oh shoot, I was scrolling too much, sorry.
Yeah, it's literally like I'm laying in bed and I'm like half asleep and I'm like, how did I do that? I don't even know how I turn that on sometimes.
Yeah.
I accidentally turn it on and then I'm like, how do I make it go back? And
Yeah.
I just keep doing whatever I just did until it goes back. It's a very like millennial thing to say, but yeah, it just we have our own measures for things like that because I feel like if you are on the internet and you make content trying to help kids figure out stuff with abuse stuff that is difficult in general, there's always people like waiting to be like, you're actually the predator. Because sometimes stuff like that does happen. Like, and it's like frustrating, of course, how somewhat often stuff like that does happen. Like, there's been multiple people on YouTube and I don't know who they are. And so don't ask me their names. I just remember seeing things about them in the last year or so that made content about like predators that were preying on kids when they were making content about how horrible people who prey on kids are. And it's just like, that is like something that happens. Sometimes they try to make themselves like this big amazing hero that is trying to like come in and save everybody as a way to like, you know, kind of hide what they're doing. Because I honestly think they think that when that stuff comes out, well, people won't believe me because look at all this other stuff I've done. But I guess the difference is watching people's content over time and realizing who is making it because they're positioning themselves as the only person that could possibly ever save you. And I'm the one that's going to go out there and I'm going to do everything and I'm going to fight the fight and fight everybody and win whatever. Or people that are just like talking about things and that are important in an approachable way that aren't like positioning themselves as anybody's hero. They're just doing it because they want to. There's a difference with how we make content. Like you will never see us make exploitative sort of videos, even just emotionally exploitative videos. Like, the kind where they start yelling. If somebody is yelling in a TikTok video, I literally will never watch it. There's people whose videos show up I've never actually watched because they're always yelling. And some of them are saying things that I would generally like agree with, but I can't find out because they're always yelling. And so I just don't watch it. And so even like that sort of exploitative, sort of emotional kind of, not rage baiting, but just emotional baiting people, those sort of videos, we don't make videos like that. And that does mean that our videos don't get as many views because we don't do stuff like that. But it also means that when people do see our videos, they actually take us seriously or like understand that we know where we're coming from because we're not doing that stuff.
Yeah.
And instead we're just talking. That's like the basic way to figure that out in the most bare bones sort of way of like, is this person okay or not? It's like, well, are they like using social media like practices to make you emotionally like responsible for their well-being? Because I see people online sometimes doing stuff like that of like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to find this predator, and if you guys if you don't hear from me in a couple days, call this number because I might be in jail. Or something like, they like act like they're like the person that's saving everybody, and you guys have to help this person because if we don't help them then nobody will. And it's always like the most unhelpful sort of things that they want that person to do. It usually involves something to do with the police, and they're like the most unhelpful people on the planet
Yeah.
when it comes to especially like kids that you think are being groomed. And so, okay, the part of this conversation that I wanted to talk about was when everything happened with Connor and Zoe, and people started seeing these videos of her talking about quote unquote dating him and posting videos of her basically kissing him publicly and things like that were out there. There are other things that the kids that were on these like group like Zoom calls and things or FaceTime calls also saw between them. Like all of the kids that she talked to all knew that this was going on, and none of them knew like what to do. And the only thing that people at the time in like 2020 when this initially happened did was a bunch of them called the police in where he lives. And when they called the police did, of course, nothing. The police
Yeah.
usually do nothing when it comes to situations like this, but especially with a boy, they do even less than nothing. Connor said in his video that he brought like a computer or a notebook or something that had or his phone, that's what he said. He had his phone with him that had a bunch of videos of him and Zoe doing extremely inappropriate things. Um, uh, anyway, and that he had his phone there expecting like the police to want to look through it. And even though he went saying that like nothing was happening because he's a victim, that's what we do. Um, the police didn't even take his phone.
Yeah.
He said that the police just basically were like, oh yeah, this is nothing, and they wrote in their like report that they looked through his phone and didn't find anything on there. But they never actually took his phone because they never even took it seriously that a 13-year-old boy who was around a 19 at the time year old girl, that's an attractive girl, could possibly be exploited or abused by that girl. And so they didn't even look, and if they looked at his phone, they would have found all those videos of her kissing him and doing all these very inappropriate things with him, and where they would have had to ask him more questions, but they never even bothered to look and even if they had bothered to look, there's no way that anything would have actually come from that legal wise. But like one of my like many things that I just can never, I feel like I'll be saying this until I like get dementia one day and I lose the ability to speak, is that um, telling the police is never what you should do if you think, especially a child, is being abused. That is the last thing you should ever do. That is like step 500 on if there's like a list of things that you want to do to try to help a kid that you think might be going through grooming or abuse or both, because grooming is abuse, but you get it. um, the police is like the thing that you do at like the last possible second. We made a guide that we used Percy Jackson characters to try to explain abuse stuff, and part of that guide I wrote in there that the only time that you should ever contact the police as like somebody who's trying to help somebody else is if the child that you're trying to help wants you to. Because one of the most, like, granted, I'm honestly happy that this never happened to me, but this sort of thing, it keeps a lot of us living in fear all the time. Like, I'm still weirdly afraid of the police.
Yeah.
Like, I'm 40 years old and I still think that the police are going to like show up at my door and arrest me for something that I've done. And the reason why that like fear is always kind of with you is that like the police are always like this threat, and it would be extremely traumatic to have somebody that you confided in about whatever was going on with the person in your life, and they went to the police, and so then suddenly the police just like show up somewhere that you are, and they're interrogating the person, if it's somebody in your family especially that is hurting you, and suddenly they're asking you all these questions, and it's like, I'm never going to tell anybody anything ever again, because I like kind of tried to trust that person. I tried to tell them things that were going on, and that's a betrayal. You're betraying that child to tell like authorities about things, even if you're doing it because you think that is going to help them. That's not going to help them. Like, having one less person to trust them, when that is not going to go anywhere with the police, because the child is never going to be able to have the freedom to tell the police what is actually going on, because you told them before they were ready. And so they're not ready to like tell the truth. They're going to lie. Of course they're going to lie. What,
Yeah,
like,
Connor went in fully lying.
kids don't have any rights. And so like if you're living especially with somebody that is abusing you, and then somebody shows up and tells the police, "Oh, hey, I think so and so is abusing them." And then the police show up and ask you, "Do you think this person is abusing you?" If you like, no matter what happens, most of the time when you talk to the police, even if you tell them everything, you have to go home with them. Because
Yeah.
you're a child and you don't have anywhere else to stay. You either go home with them or you get put in like foster care. And that horrifying situation, which is not any better. And so it's like, telling kids before they're ready is one of the worst things you can ever do to a kid that's going through abuse, because they're never going to trust anybody else with anything. And so like the way I always look at that is like, what is more important? Like, you telling the authorities because you have been conditioned to believe that the authorities will actually do something about that, even though there's stories literally every single day about how the authorities don't do anything about that. And so like, people at the same time know that CPS never goes after the people that are actually doing anything, and just go after poor people that don't have any money. And they don't even, there's like endless cases where they don't do anything. Like, I have made videos about that for years on TikTok, and every time I do, I get like re-traumatized by people just leaving me comments telling me things that happen about, like, there's many people over the years have left me comments saying that the CPS worker would literally tell their parent that as long as there weren't bruises visible on the kid's body, that they wouldn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
And so it's like, there's telling them is never like the option. And so really what any like adult or authority figure is doing when you tell the authorities is you're just taking yourself out of it. Like, you don't want to have to actually deal with this situation, because I understand why you would be afraid of doing the wrong thing. And so you're just being like, oh, well, if I get the police involved or whoever, CPS, whatever, involved, then I don't have to deal with it. I don't have to like figure out what to do. I can just wash my hands of it and tell myself that the authorities are going to handle it now and leave.
Yeah.
That's what people are usually doing when they do that. They don't know what to do, and instead of figuring that out, like
Hmm.
calling, like, there are free hotlines at any domestic violence shelter that are open 24 hours a day that are completely anonymous. There are other hotlines too that are completely anonymous as well, but those are ones that you can find anywhere you live. There is some domestic violence shelter no matter where you live. In the United States at least, even if they're a couple hours away, they'll still answer the phone when you call, and they won't ask you any questions about who you are if you don't want to tell them. You don't have to
Hmm.
tell them anything, and you can call them and ask them for help. You can call them and say, like, hey, I think this kid might be in this situation. Here are the things that I've seen. How do I talk to them? And they will actually give you some actual good advice about how to do that. You really don't know, and you don't know anyone else that could possibly ever tell you. And that's a lot better than just calling police and walking away from that kid and leaving them in an impossible situation where now the person that hurt them knows that they told somebody about it.
Yeah.
um, like that. And when I said that, I was like, oh, I'm still afraid of the police. You are constantly living under the fear of CPS or the police showing up at your house if you somehow do something wrong. And so,
Hmm.
like, you're always like performing. You're always kind of like acting for people every single second of every single day, no matter what you do or where you go. It never stops because you're always like under that pressure that, like, what if I say something wrong, or what if I do something that somehow makes somebody realize that something is happening, because you don't really know when you're going through it like what it is that people that makes people realize, because you're it like when you're just living in that, you're just you can't be aware of
Yeah.
things like that in the way that you can be when you're more removed from it. And so you're just scared of everything you do. Like, I remember when I was in seventh grade and my parents had me in therapy because I really didn't want to be alive anymore. That was the first time I felt like that. Um,
Hmm.
uh, the days that I would go to school, which was hardly any at all, I missed like half of the year that year and like failed all of my classes because I just was never there. Some of the days where I was there was the days when I would be picked up early to go to therapy. And the days that I would be there when I didn't leave to go to therapy, I would look out of like the little windows that are next to like the doors in like classrooms and like on and off throughout the entire class period looking to see if the police were there to arrest me.
Hmm.
Because I was, every time I had a therapy appointment, I would be terrified that I did something or said something that gave something away, and my therapist would call the cops and like call the cops and like arrest my dad and then come to ask me about things. I was so terrified of that happening that after every appointment that I'm like, I'm not even sure that, like, I don't even know what I said to that therapist,
Yeah.
because anything I said, I was not like ever telling anything real that was actually happening, because I couldn't. I have this like tiny memory of my dad being in a therapy appointment with me and my therapist, and my dad and I were basically having an entirely different conversation in front of her, and she
Yeah.
had no idea what was actually going on. Like, what we were she had it looked like we were talking about one thing, but we were actually talking about something completely different, but she did not pick up on any of it.
Hmm.
And so it's like that it was helpful for me to go to therapy because I felt better about life in general after I was done, and I always thought positively about it, which is why I eventually went back like 20 years later, because I wanted to go back for a long time, and because that I thought that experience was a positive experience. But still I lived in fear like that forever. And
Yeah.
so that's like, you don't want to validate that fear of a kid, to like validate the fear that the police are going to come knocking on their door if they just have a friend or just
Hmm.
confide in somebody somewhere, like that feeling that like somebody is always somehow watching everything you do and they're going to like find out what you've done. It just it never completely, goes away. And so, like, since I just went on that whole thing about like don't call the police, don't like just run to mandatory reporters, I have a never ending grudge against mandatory reporters. Like, I hate a lot most of them. because like none of them like ever really did much for me, and so I'm like, what are you mandatorily reporting? Because you reported literally nothing. And my dad was not good at hiding like stuff. He was not. And so I'm like, it was pretty obvious that there was bad things happening. So why didn't you actually try? I don't know. Or like even try to talk to me about it. So I always have grudges against them because people who are mandatory reporters only bring up that they are in situations that would screw over children.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they just don't do anything. And advice that I always have for people, like especially if you're like a kid too, and you see a friend of yours talking to somebody online or in person, and you're afraid that, and they're talking to somebody who's a lot older than you guys are, and you know that that's not
Hmm.
right, or you feel weird about it and you don't know how to talk to your friend about it because you've tried but they get upset like whenever you do, it doesn't
Hmm.
like really go anywhere, or if especially if you're an adult and you're trying to figure out how to talk to a kid about it without them like shutting down and
Yeah.
just not telling you anything. I know this isn't the advice that anybody wants to hear because it's not like a quick decision, but this is the thing that will actually lead to something good happening, which is to just like listen to them when they talk about that other person. And when things come up that you might find like troubling, like you like ask them about it.
Hmm.
And but not in like a argumentative or like confronting sort of way. Just kind of ask them questions like when they tell them about something, they tell you about something that person said to them that they didn't like people do, and
Hmm.
ask them like how do you feel about that, or like what did you think when they said that. Just like give them the option to like think about it, because that kind of stuff does lead to things happening. Or invite them to places, like even if you
Hmm.
hate the person that they're around, be like, hey, can you and whoever, like if it's somebody that they know in person, especially this is easier I suppose in person, but it works when it's online too, like,
Hmm.
hey, can so and so come with you? We're gonna get together at so and so's house and watch movies. Can you guys come with? Or we're going somewhere. Can you guys come with us? And just like invite them to places to give like the person like the opportunity to show that they're not a creep, because somebody who isn't a creep would come to things like that and try to get to know their friends, the people that are in
Yeah.
their lives. But a lot of times, people like that don't want to know those people. They want to keep you alone, isolated away from everybody else, like what happened with the kids with Zoe. And so, if you just ask them, like, prompt them, like, to come and, like, hang out with you, or to just, or even to, like, ask your friend, like, hey, can you come over and, like, sleep over at my house this weekend? Can you, like, come to, like, whatever with like my family alone. Like there should be no problem with them, with that person letting them go to things by themselves. And like that
Hmm.
even works when you're online, because if it's like an online situation, you could be like, hey, could I like FaceTime with you guys to get to know this person? Or
Yeah.
do you want to like go on one of those websites where you can watch movies together? We could watch movies together one night. Or like can I talk to you like just us instead of with them there? And it's like just like the easy things to bring up like that, so that, and it like the reason why that kind of stuff generally works in the long term is that it gives the person the opportunity to realize over time that there is something wrong on their own. Because
Yeah.
whether people like it or not, the only way to actually help somebody, no matter who it is, whether it's a kid that is being groomed by somebody impersonating somebody, or a real person like Zoe doing it on Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok or Discord or Be Real or whatever other app
Apps
comes
that,
out,
yeah.
or if it's like an adult that is getting to know somebody in person, or somebody online too that is being like going through the same thing. It can be people in their 40s and 50s can experience grooming in some way. You can experience grooming from a boss that you work for, and
Hmm.
even if it even with outside of like romantic situations. Your
Yeah.
friends can groom you if they want to, and things like that too. But I'm just saying, it doesn't matter the age or like where it happens or what it is. The thing that always helps somebody get away is them realizing slowly on their own what is actually going on. And then once they realize, that the key always in these situations is to help them prompt with things so they can realize like a problem, because a problem just keeps like reoccurring, and they can't help but notice it, obviously, that like this person in their life isn't letting them see their friends or their family anymore. Like Connor mentioned that was one of those things he noticed that was going on with him, that made him like question what was going on with Zoe, because he never saw his friends anymore, and his friends would ask him where he was and if he was okay. His parents never saw him anymore because he was always on his phone with her, and they were asking if he was okay. And the other victim mentioned this similar sort of things happening with people in his life as
Hmm.
well. Every kid, even the kids that were groomed by her in like non-romantic ways, that were groomed by her, who had like fan accounts and fan sites and stuff, mentioned
Hmm.
similar things. And so if people keep noticing the same issues and problems keep coming up, they will go to people in their life that they trust
Hmm.
to talk to you about that. If you have shown that you are a friend of theirs that has tried to get to know this person, that hasn't like said anything to them about how that person is bad for you, you need to break up with them, you're like the person that they go to talk about whatever's going on, then when things start going badly, they will come to you about that too. If you try to
Yeah.
force them and try to tell them on your timeline when you want them to figure it out, you are going to explode that relationship. And then when they do realize that something is wrong, they won't have a way to get out. That is what
Hmm.
happens every time when people try to force it, because they just want it to happen when they want it to happen. I understand that
Yeah.
it's hard to watch kids, especially, but I understand that it's hard to watch anybody going through something that you know is hurting them. I trust me, I understand. I see it all the time.
Hmm.
Seeing like the videos that we make, I see kids posting about being sexually abused in the past and had never told anybody before. And I just
Yeah.
kind of like watch their videos and like them, but I usually don't even comment on them because I don't want to scare them away. But
Yeah,
I do.
but your strategy of being ever present also would just let the person know, hey, there's somebody that cares about this person,
Yeah,
somebody who has their eyes on them.
yeah, like
And like,
somebody still
yeah,
cares about me outside of this person. Because a
yeah,
lot of that stuff, that a lot of like the grooming stuff that happens, is that the person that's grooming you feels like, you feel like they're the only person that would understand you, they're the only person that would like put up with you, kind of stuff. And so if there's somebody else in their life that is still there with them despite whatever else has happened, it shows that that person is not the only one.
yeah.
And it's just like, people talk about support systems, but that is actually what being a support system is
Hmm.
that is actually supporting them. It's easy to say you're being somebody's support system when everything is going fine.
Yeah.
It's not easy to be the person that is trying to support them when everything is awful, but they haven't completely realized it yet. And part of caring about people sometimes is sticking it out with them when they're in that place, so that they have a much easier time of realizing it and getting away from that person a lot faster. Because every abusive situation you've ever heard that gets to a really bad place where they get like physically harmed, or they die, or they hurt somebody in a serious way or something, those always happen because they don't have anybody to go to, because the people that they had in their life that were friends and things like that just like dropped away. Like,
Yeah.
I think yesterday or the day before, I saw this video on TikTok that was this girl telling like this really animated, like fun just story. She said it was just like one of those wild stories about online friends when she was a teenager on Tumblr. And she was telling this whole story about this girl that she was really good, like a best friend online, and the things that they had in common and blah blah blah. Towards the end of the story, all of a sudden, she says in like this still like happy sounding voice, she's describing that her friend was in an abusive relationship. And
Right.
that when that friend was in an abusive relationship, she stopped talking to her for a while. And then when she came back and said that she wanted to talk to her again, she blocked her. And I like sat there and like looking at that video for a while afterwards, and I was like, that was so disorienting because that girl told that whole story as like a fun anecdote, but when
Happy,
it comes
yeah.
down to it, it was a teenage girl that she was really close friends with that was in an abusive relationship, and when she disappeared because she was in that relationship, she just cut off contact with her completely. And
Hmm.
that happens a lot. I know that it's not easy to watch somebody going through something that you know is hurting them, but if you actually care about that person, it's really worth it to do that. Even if it's hard for you, whatever they're experiencing is likely a lot worse.
Yeah.
And if you kind of stick it out for a little bit, it will make whatever they're going through shorter and a
Yeah.
lot easier. And that's just what I wish. I see videos all the time of people talking about grooming, and they never give any actual advice. And this is like the advice that I always want to give people. I've tried to do it before, but um, but the videos that I would make about grooming wouldn't get a lot of views because I'm not being crazy about it.
Hmm.
Um, and but that's generally the advice is like try to stay in contact with them, try to make up times where you could interact with the person that's grooming them to naturally show the problems in that relationship. Like you don't have to explain to the person that they're trying to isolate you when every time you try to hang out with that person they find a reason to not show up.
Hmm.
Like that person knows because they've already seen it happen.
Yeah.
You don't have to like go through this whole thing of explaining it all to them when they've seen the things that people who are grooming do in front of their own eyes. It's right there. And so they can figure it out. Even if they don't know the name of what's happening to them, they understand that something that they don't like is going on. And that's really what it is. Like every time there's a trend on TikTok about grooming, I just get so mad because I'm like, every person that is going through this is now like add at least a year of them being in that relationship after
Hmm.
this because you've just made victims feel shame, and which just makes them want to prove that you're wrong about the relationship that they're in.
Yeah.
Um,
I will say the only thing that where it was like I would call the police immediately, and this is just my thing with like with situations like this, and particularly something Zoe kept doing, was she kept telling people, "Oh, if you don't talk to me, I'm gonna kill my, or I'm gonna, yeah, I won't say the
oh
words
yeah,
because TikTok will, yeah,
call the police
but
on
like,
her.
yes, yeah, if someone is genuinely telling you, hey, if you don't do this for me, I'm going to unalive myself, that is
Hmm.
the one time where you should be like, you know what? I'm going to take this extremely seriously. I'm going to call somebody because if you're feeling that way, I am not, like me, a teenager is not the person who's going to fix this.
Yeah,
Um, and so that's like the one part of the situation where I'm like, okay, you should, like as the person this is happening to, probably call the police in that situation, even just to call their bluff.
yeah, because you when the most manipulative, like abusive thing that anyone can say to you
Hmm.
is bring up like suicide in that way. That is just when they go there, it means that they have like tried everything else and nothing else has worked. I always feel like a crazy person saying this because the internet is really weird about kids. Um,
Hmm.
but kids are human beings.
Yeah.
Um, FYI. And so anyone who actually cares about kids wouldn't want to tell them something that would be really upsetting to them, that would be
Yeah.
like generally traumatic for them to hear. Like if it's traumatic for an adult to be told like I'm going to kill myself if you don't do this for me, a child would be it would be even worse because a child has doesn't have like the emotional intelligence or like the developmental like levels that adults have to even know how to handle that. Adults don't even know how to handle that, much less a child.
Yeah.
And so anyone who it doesn't even have to be something that bad, but when people go to kids when you're not the same age as a kid, like if you're older, much older than them, and you're going to kids and telling them things that would upset anybody,
Hmm.
there's something off going on there because why would you want to make a kid upset on purpose?
Yeah. So I do like your strategy. And I do get why it's hard to trust somebody who goes immediately to the police. Like there is kind of a middle ground here of you want that person to be ready. You want that person to be like ready to fully go and like I want to do something about this. And you want to be the person that helps them figure out like, hey, something bad is happening to me because a lot of times when you're that young, you don't even realize it's bad. Like you've talked about this where you didn't even realize that was what was happening to you until you
Mm-hmm.
learned about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's it is important to ask those questions like does this relationship make you feel good because some of the ways Connor was describing his relationship with Zoe towards the end especially it sounds like he didn't want to be there anymore. It
Yeah.
sounds like he was done, but this girl was telling him I am going to off myself if we stop talking. No one can ever find out anything we did. I will lose everything. And the poor kid having empathy was like I can't do that to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I mean by like just listen to them is that if you just like let that person talk, they'll probably eventually say something that will give you an opening to ask them about something they said or like just ask them about like what do you mean like what happened or just ask them like do you even want to talk to them anymore?
Yeah.
To give them the option to say no if that's how they really feel. That's like the basic thing is just to talk to them. Like if you are a very like logic minded person, look at it like an experiment and
Hmm.
see like the things that you can bring up with them that makes one response. If that response isn't good, then you try something else. And it's just like that's the better way to just communicate with them, to keep communication open is always the key to any of this kind of stuff happening because it's when communication gets like cut off that like the worst stuff happens. And so if you can kind of stay in there as somebody that's still around,
Hmm.
that is somebody, at least one person that they can go to, then it just always leads to something good. Like that situation, you being there to talk to them, even if there's some really bad stuff going on that you don't know about yet, because you're not like forcing them to say it, that's still not a bad thing, because that stuff was going to happen likely regardless of if you were there or not. But you being there as somebody that they can talk to means that when they're ready to talk about it, they have somebody that they can go to,
Hmm.
instead of it just being like this thing. Like when you realize that something is wrong and you want to tell somebody, it's like really weird to try to figure out like who. If
Yeah.
you don't have anybody in your life that you would go to that don't know the person that you're talking about or anything like that, that doesn't leave a lot of people. And so like the situation with Connor is a good example that a lot of his friends online all liked Zoe. And so he couldn't go to any of them about
Hmm.
anything that was going on. And so it left him only the people like his parents or, you know, maybe like a teacher or a counselor at school or somebody like that would be like the people that you would go to. Like a high school friend of mine, after way after high school was over, her niece went to her guidance counselor at school and told her that her stepdad was abusing her. And it's like that kind of a thing. Those are like the people that we usually tell because they establish themselves as like sick people.
Hmm.
But you can do that too, and it and just try to be patient because this whole thing is not something that you can fix. Like even if you think it's obvious that like this influencer shouldn't be talking to people, their fans online, you can't really like force them. Like when we saw those videos of Andrew Alvarez from the first season of Percy Jackson, and there were kids that the kids that he was talking to were trying to defend him
Hmm.
in the comments, and like people were like, you know, saying like it's not appropriate for him to send a picture of him shirtless even if he is swimming because he's that's just never something that a like a 19-20-year-old boy should be sending to like younger girls on the internet that he doesn't know,
Yeah.
and trying to tell them like it's inappropriate that he's talking to you at all because he's like somebody that you guys look up to kind of stuff. But other than that, like that's the best that people did was just kind of respond to comments that they were leaving. But then other than that, like nobody in the Percy Jackson fandom was like out with a torch and pitchfork trying to like hunt him down. He got kicked out of the production on his own.
Hmm.
We didn't have to do anything. Like, people made videos talking about that this situation was happening so that other kids would be aware, and which led to discussions of that, of people who didn't understand why that was wrong, being like explained and all that. But nobody was out having to like search him or find him or try to come after him or be vindictive towards him in the way that people like to do on the internet, because it just kind of naturally happened. People found out what he was doing. Disney definitely would have found out what he was doing, and they kicked his ass off of the production. And
As
now
it
he's
should be.
just,
Yep.
as he should be, now he's just doing whatever he's doing. Um,
Weird Mormon stuff.
Whatever he's doing in his life, it doesn't involve this production anymore, which means a lot of his exposure is like cut off from a lot of people, which is good, so that it won't happen again. Um, and so, but that was the way that that naturally like kind of happened, and that's like that's honestly the best way to handle a situation like that, was for people to post about it so that people are aware of it happening. It makes the people that are victims of it question what's happening when they see how other people are responding to it. And then he eventually lost his job because of it, and so they're gonna like move on to him from him to somebody else.
Yeah.
That's honestly a good example of how that happens, what I was just saying, in like real time basically.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else about Zoe we didn't cover yet?
um she likes Jesus a lot now.
They always go for the Jesus rebound. And I
Yeah,
mean, like,
I had to
I,
bring that up.
yeah, I understand why it happens in prison, right? Because prison, there's no other social type things except for, like Bible study, and you
Hmm.
have plenty of time to sit there and read your Bible. I understand why that happens in those circumstances, but the influencers who get canceled turning to Jesus, that is something that needs to be studied.
Yeah, it's literally like a whole thing, because Gabby Hanna did the same thing.
Yeah, she's on her, like, alt-right, weird, conservative era.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like the way that they talk about it is very much like a thing of like they use Jesus as like a get out of jail free card of like,
Oh yeah,
oh,
like her, oh, I wanna ask for forgiveness and I'm not gonna actually say anything I did wrong
mm-hmm,
video. That's a good
mm-hmm,
example.
mm-hmm. And they just say like, oh, I'm a good person because Jesus loves me,
And of
and
course
Jesus
Joey
forgives.
Graceffa was like, yeah, I forgive you.
He's a punk. And he and is like, oh, and they'll always say like, oh, Jesus like will forgive my sins and things like that. And it's like, I don't. Who
Yeah.
cares what Jesus thinks? But it's just like the spiritual bypassing is the actual phrase for that, where instead of dealing with any feelings, you just like are like, oh, but Jesus loves me or God loves me, so it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what I've done in the past because they love me, right? So I'm fine. It's like, no,
Yeah.
no, ma'am. Like Zoe on Zoe Laverne's Instagram, one of the only things I looked at from her, I wanted to see like when she had, because one of the aspects of this story is that she had a child
She
in
is now a
October
mother.
of, yeah, in October of 2021. So the kid's like pretty old. She was talking to one of her victims until last year, and he's 16.
Yeah, you are literally a mother. Get a grip, girl.
Yeah, and so I wanted to see like how old her kid was, to see like, is the kid like a baby? I'm like, no, it's like 4. Okay, so she's been talking to all these kids for all this time while also being a mother at the same time, talking about Jesus all the time. But on like her Instagram, the one like comment underneath the picture she posted of her pregnancy test just says pedophile.
Yeah, I
And I
saw
just
that.
laughed.
If you go through her highlights reel of her baby stuff, there's scattered comments, and I don't recommend leaving hate. It's just a little bit funny that it's happening.
It's
Just a
funny to
tiny
like
bit.
see it because it's her Instagram is very like aesthetic-y, you know? And
Yeah.
so it's just funny to see like a very aesthetic, like filtered picture of a pregnancy test and then see pedophile on the bottom, just ruining like the entire like look. Like whoever paid, she probably paid somebody to be in charge of her social media to make
Yeah.
everything look really nice, and then you just ruined all that person's work with one
Oh my
comment that
gosh.
they for some reason never deleted. Like you can delete those like comments that people leave on stories and stuff so people can't see them anymore. But for some reason it's still there. And so that just like made me laugh. It is generally like overall a good idea that if you, I know the idea of like wanting to look at somebody that you find out is has been accused of something horrible, you want to like almost look at them because to see almost if they are like a real person in a way
Hmm.
by seeing them online. But beyond just kind of looking at their page is always just like a good example of like don't actually interact with them though,
Yeah, it's not worth
because
it.
you never know what they're like. If they are probably still like grooming some kids out there somewhere, if you antagonize them, that's just going to make things harder for those people.
Hmm.
And like Zoe does have a husband and a kid. Who the fuck knows what kind of like husband, like wife
I
or
saw
mom she
I saw
is?
various whisperings about the husband. I don't even want
I don't
to
want to
turn.
know.
Yeah, I don't want to know. I'm sure he's not the greatest if he's married to her.
Yeah, and so it's like you antagonizing her might feel good for you in that moment, but those people will be like affected by the things that you say, and I just don't think it's worth it to like make somebody who's already abusive mad on purpose. Unless there's like an actual like reason, like you have to for some reason, which I can't think of an example of why, but unless it's like a situation like you have to in some way,
Hmm.
then okay. But unless it's like a situation like that, then it's best to just, if you want to look at them, watch them from afar. Never like anything, never comment on anything. Just kind of observe them like an animal in the zoo or something, where you're not actually like interacting with them in any way. And otherwise, just try to block them and stay away from them because you just never know what somebody like that is capable of.
Yeah.
Like if you can hurt a 13-year-old child who looked like a tiny little baby, like Connor did, there's no, who knows what else that person can do to somebody else.
Yeah. Oh, I have Sky in my comments. We are doing 2 episodes a week now, and we decided what is going to be on content and what is going to be just the random topics. So that we are ideally here not as long, although we're about to hit 3 hours. So
I just like talking to you twice a week.
yeah, seriously. I mean, we're always talking on voice notes too, but it's just,
Hmm.
yeah. So we're about to wrap up though. I gotta get William to bed. I mean, it's the
Hmm.
start of his summer vacation. So, um, let's see. We have Cersei chapters 4 through 6 for next time for Monday. And, yeah, hopefully we'll get some fan stuff, for the Percy Jackson show to talk about next week as well.
Hmm.
Yeah,
We'll
I
probably
mean,
get
we're always
something.
hoping for more like show news.
Yeah, and who knows? I hope, I generally hope, because Becky and Rick aren't on social media at all like the last week. I hope they're on vacation celebrating their birthday slash anniversary,
Yes.
doing something fun before season 3 is about to start at like the end of this
Yes.
month.
Yeah, they're about to start filming season 3 soon, or like
As,
their pre-production.
as I just like every time I say that, like there's just like this noise of like panic that goes off in my brain.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, we will be back on Monday for more of Cersei.
Yes.
All right. Bye.